All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship Detroit Chapter 2021 Celebration of Service. I'm Dennis Archambault, Vice President of Public Affairs for Authority Health and Program Director of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship. Albert Schweitzer was a prolific writer on the subject of humanitarianism and many other topics. Our fellows explore his commentaries each month for what Dr. Schweitzer said and what it means to them. For today's celebration of service, I selected a passage from his essay, I Resolved to Become a Jungle Doctor. It's a statement that Schweitzer composed at about the same time of our Schweitzer Fellows. I'm sorry, the same age as the Schweitzer Fellows. On October 13th, 1905, I dropped into a letterbox on the Avenue de la Grande Armée in Paris, letters to my parents and to some of my closest friends, telling them at the beginning of the winter term, I would embark on the study of medicine with the idea of later going out into equatorial Africa as a doctor. In one letter, I submitted my resignation from the post of principal of the Theological Seminary of St. Thomas, because I concluded that the time required of my studies would preclude my other involvement. The plan I hoped to realize had been in my mind for some time. Long ago, in student days, I had thought about it. It struck me as inconceivable that I should be allowed to live and lead such a happy life while I saw so many people around me struggling with sorrow and suffering. Even at school, I had felt stirred whenever I caught a glimpse of the miserable home surroundings of some of my classmates and compared them with the ideal conditions in which we, children of the parsonage, have lived. At the university, enjoying the good fortune of studying and even getting some good results in scholarship in the arts, I could not help but think continually of others who were denied that good fortune by their material circumstances or their health. One brilliant summer morning in Gunsbach during the Wincitude holidays in 1896, as I awoke, the thought came to me that I must not accept this good fortune as a matter of course, but must give something back in return. While outside the birds sang, I reflected on this thought, and before I had gotten up, I came to the conclusion that until I was 30, I could consider myself justified in devoting myself to scholarship in the arts. But after that, I would devote myself directly to serving humanity. The Schweitzer Fellowship is designed to support the leadership development of graduate students about to enter professional life. There are several aspects of the fellowship that we hope our fellows will retain over time. One important one is a commitment to serving humanity. Fellows, we hope that as you begin your professional work, you will remember to follow Dr. Schweitzer's example and devote yourself to serving humanity. Most of you will do this professionally through your work in health and human services, but the pressure to do what you need to do to sustain your lifestyle may cause you to lose sight of your core mission. Hopefully, you will keep your boulder close to you, remembering that every barrier is nothing but a boulder, and all boulders can be moved with a little help from friends. And now I'd like to introduce Alice Thompson, Chair of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship Detroit Chapter Advisory Board and Vice Chair of the Authority Health Board of Directors. Ms. Thompson.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Dennis. And I am Alice Thompson, Chairperson by honor and privilege of the Albert Schweitzer Advisory Board. So on behalf of the board, congratulations on your achievements this year. You have had the challenge and or the opportunity of pursuing your Schweitzer Fellowship during a very difficult time. Our board understands the conditions the coronavirus has placed on your work. We are pleased with your progress in overcoming obstacles in achieving your fellowship goals, especially that much of your work will turn out to be sustainable. We believe the Schweitzer Fellowship pursues the values of humanitarian work that were defined by Albert Schweitzer in the 21st century. Believe in those values, in humanitarian values. You are interpreting them and in many ways redefining them as you confront the difficult issues of this evolving century. The Schweitzer Fellowship, we believe, is an important learning opportunity for you. And I hope and the board hopes that you have taken every opportunity to learn how to overcome tremendous challenges to accomplish your work. While they may have been difficult, it will help you in life, which often pose extremely difficult challenges. So hopefully you have gained many lessons learned that you will use in the future when you confront other such challenges. The fellowship also is an asset to our community. So to our community partners in the audience, we are pleased to have helped strengthen the safety net with new ideas and approaches to the needs of our vulnerable community. Fellows, you have concluded your fellowship at a time in which we are emerging from the worst pandemic that we have experienced in 100 years, complicated by also social and political unrest. This is a time for social leaders to emerge from our younger generation, and you represent that for us. So our hope and our confidence is in you as our future leaders. Perhaps appropriately, you might reflect once more on the words of Albert Schweitzer. Make your life your argument. Make your life your argument. Make your argument clear and make it loud as you pursue and advance your professional career and your professional life. So once again, congratulations on all that you have achieved, and we are so proud to have you as our new fellows. So thank you very much. Dennis, back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Loretta Bush, our president and CEO, was unable to join us today due to surgery. She recorded this greeting, though, to share with you.
I'm Loretta Bush, President and CEO for Authority Health. By the time you see this video, I'll be home recovering from surgery. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity to extend greetings and congratulations to our 2021 Schweitzer Fellows. When I spoke to you at orientation, you were entering a very uncertain time. The coronavirus pandemic had come to Michigan, and our state entered a lockdown phase. Your fellowship projects were preempted, at least for the time being. The lockdown prevented all of us from leaving our homes, except for essential purposes. I am so proud that some of you found opportunities to serve in frontline functions, like packing quarantine boxes and hygiene kits and supporting other community service projects. You were accepted as leaders, and as leaders, you stepped up to the challenges. That doesn't mean that leadership is always easy. Your fellowships were the most difficult they could be, because primarily you couldn't do them at all, at least not the way you intended to. You had to pivot, just as we did. You needed to improvise, to adapt, and to overcome. That was our theme for 2020. As a member of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship Board, together with our chair, Alice Thompson, and other board members, we attempted to support you as we observed your challenges through the many summer months. Many of you adapted well to the boulders that came your way constantly, as one of you reflected. By the fall, you were all moving forward, and then yet another pause. It got in your way. You kept going. You did the best that you could, because that's what humanitarians do. Soon you will become fellows for life. We hope that your fellowship experience has informed and inspired your professional development, and that you will remain connected to our program in Detroit. If your career takes you elsewhere, we encourage you to be part of the Fellows for Life network. Now, in the words of Albert Schweitzer, the purpose of human life is to serve, to show compassion, and to have the will to help others. On behalf of your Authority Health family, I congratulate you and I thank you for your service. Be well.
Paula Tutman has received several Emmy Awards in her more than 35 years on the air and in our Detroit community. Her exposure to humanitarian service occurred quite young as a child of Peace Corps parents. Her humanism coverage of the news. Currently, she is a specialty correspondent with a focus on interesting and relevant topics at WDIV. She has a deep regard for stories that have elements of human interest and social justice. Paula is also an entrepreneur. Noting that women are master multitaskers, she has pursued multiple professional interests. She teaches the Master Your Message Communication course to organizations and corporations. She is also the owner of Zookit, a company that is preparing to launch Paula's Invention, a product that literally supports women. In addition to her professional endeavors, Paula is an active volunteer with a strong commitment to community. She is the founder and chair emeritus of the nonprofit organization Children's Tooth Fairy Foundation. She also has a deep love for the arts and has been a member of numerous boards that benefit children in the arts. A published author, her first novel series, called Deadline, won recognition from the International Thriller Writers Association, the Virginia Book Festival, and the Hollywood Book Festival. She's also a screenwriter and currently marketing 2 full-length movie screenplays, a dramatic television series pilot, and a yet unpublished thriller novel. It's hard to believe that Paula has any time to rest, but that depends on how you define rest. Her leisure interests include competitive sailing, horseback riding, flying an F-16 jet, motorcycle riding, and in her bio she notes crashing a motorcycle, performing in an opera, and opening a circus as a clown. She has witnessed the great polar bear migration in the Canadian subarctic and photographed bushmen in Senegal. And to top it off, she raises orchids, which she believes are nature's most sensuous blooms. Paula splits her time between rural Ontario and suburban Detroit with her husband, 3 beautiful and brilliant stepdaughters, and a deeply loved rescue bull mastiff. As you can see, we are very fortunate to have Paula Tutman as our speaker today on many levels, and please welcome her now. Paula?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is well. Congratulations to the Schweitzer Fellows. This is an exciting time. It's a scary time, but it's an exciting time. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. I really love, I love the focus of your program today, your celebration, and that is to make your life your argument. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to indulge me just a little bit, because I really want to give you the argument that I've made for my life. And I'm not saying that this needs to be a roadmap or a blueprint for anyone else's life, but I just want to give you a sense of how I've gotten to where I am today in terms of what I consider to be the most important gift, and that is the gift to be able to serve others. And so when I say indulge me for just a moment, I'm going to say something that many of you may find shocking. I want to talk to you about giving back to the community, except actually, I want to talk to you about not giving back. Because what you may be surprised to find out is that in spite of almost a lifetime of community service, I do not believe in the concept of giving back. I just want you to erase that for a moment. Again, what is she talking about? Why is she here? This is the wrong group. But just go with me for just a moment. You know, we hear a lot about the whole concept of giving back these days. In fact, many of you have probably reached a point, certainly the fellows in your life, that you are able to make efforts and to actually give back. And I'm sure there are those of you who are still thinking, well, when will I come to the point in my life where I'm able to give back? I planted my garden as I always do. And every once in a while, you know, I'll get like a few tomatoes and some cucumbers and things like that. But in the year 2020, in the year of COVID, I had this incredibly bountiful garden. And I was shocked. I mean, it was growing so fast. Sometimes I would just go out when I was so stressed. I would just walk out to my garden and I would stand there and I would just look. During the time I planted the garden, I also happened to meet a group of nuns in Detroit. And I was doing a very sad story on them. They had lost 13 of their sisters, many of them due to COVID, within a month. And here I was doing a story on them, but I found them so hopeful and interesting and so faith-filled, as you would expect a nun to be, but they also were strong believers in science. And they were trying to figure out how they could continue to help, even though they lost all of these fellow sisters. They were trying to figure out how they could continue to be relevant and help. And a food bank in the community on Detroit's east side had shut down, and they decided to start a food bank to fill a gap. So they had this curbside food bank. And I decided that I love their mission so much that I would dedicate a portion of my garden so that I could support their food bank. Because as you know, food banks, they can get a lot of perishable items and they can get donations, but they have a lot of difficulty getting, you know, fresh produce. That if the person standing next to me isn't doing well, I am not doing nearly as well as I think I am. I want you to think about that for a moment. If the person standing next to you is not doing well, are you truly doing as well as you think you are? And I was in the suburban grocery store, and there was this woman in front of me. And you know, I'm a reporter. I'm paid to be nosy, and I love to be nosy. And there was a bit of a commotion going on at the cash register, and so I dialed in, and there was this woman in front of me, and she was arguing with the cash register, with the cashier rather, because I guess her food stamps hadn't come due, or the new book hadn't come. I'm not sure what the word would be, but it hadn't come due. So that her food stamps weren't valid. And I looked on the conveyor belt, and she had bread and milk and some cookies. But it was clear this was a woman feeding her family. But the thing that I really had a problem with was how rude that cashier was being to that woman and just belittling her. Like, oh, you know, all of this stuff on this conveyor belt, now I've got to put it away. I was really angry about that. And I just kind of leaned over and I said, you know what, put it on mine. I'll handle it. And the cashier said, you don't have to do that, ma'am. You know, that was my ability. I had the gift. I had enough that I could share. I could just go to an ATM machine and increase my allowance by $25 or $50 or whatever I wanted to do. The gift in itself was the ability to give. And I was really angry about that. And I said to her, listen, you don't have to be so rude to this woman. And I said to her, I am my brother's keeper and my sister's too. And so she was kind of taken aback by that. The bottom line is the gift in itself was the ability to help. This woman didn't know who I was. She didn't have to know. She said thank you, but she didn't have to say thank you. Nobody had to say anything to me because that's not why I was doing that. I was simply doing it because I could. Yet I don't believe in giving back. I believe in doing as much as you can, giving as much as you can, whatever you can, whenever you can, however you can, to whomever you can. But I don't believe in giving back. I don't know if you're starting to get my point here? Is anybody starting to see where I'm going here? Okay. And here's the thing, that when you think about giving back, it means that there's a debt to be settled, right? When you give something back, isn't that because something is owed? doesn't that mean that in your mind, you can set it up so that, well, I gave $10,000 and so I gave back, I'm done. Or, well, I gave $50, I gave back, and so I'm done. When you say give back, in my view, it limits you in your brain, in the whole blueprint of how you're thinking and how you're seeing things. In a sense, doesn't that mean that you can give and you can be done and feel okay about that, as opposed to just giving? Just give of yourself, whatever you can, to whomever you can, whenever you can, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's a kind word. It can just be a kind gesture, but you don't have to give back, because when you think about giving back, it limits you. And so I have developed, when I talk about making my life an argument, my argument for my life is that I want to give back. I want that wantingness, not just a willingness. A willingness means you're doing it because you're okay with it. It's just like saying, I'm going to tolerate someone who's different from me, right? Wouldn't Albert Schweitzer think this way? Don't tolerate, accept. Tolerating means that you're just kind of, all right, well, they're there, as opposed to acceptance. But isn't that the same for giving of yourself and not limiting yourself and not just having a willingness to give, but a wantingness? Because if you have a wantingness to give of yourself, that in itself is the gift. Because if you have enough to give anything, whether it's your time or your efforts or your talents, then you have enough, because you have enough to give. And so that's why I truly, truly believe not in giving back, but developing a wantingness to give, not as little as you can possibly get away with, but as much as you can possibly give. That is how I live my life. That is how I live my argument for my life. I don't know if that's going to matter to you down the road, or maybe it will. Or one day you'll have an opportunity to give of yourself and you'll go, oh man, I remember Paula Tutman said this story about, or you'll find your own reasons. You'll find your own wantingness to give. But that is one of my favorite stories to tell, because I hope that it impacts everyone in this room, virtual room, and my messy office. You're clearly people who have a willingness to give of yourself because you are fellows. But do you have a wantingness? Have you developed your wantingness to give? Have you opened your heart up and your mind so that you have this amazing ability and opportunity and invitation to be tasked with giving of yourself and not giving back, because that limits you, but just giving?
Our first presenter is Jeneen Ali, Wayne State University Nutrition Doctoral Program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeneen Ali, and like Dennis said, I'm a PhD candidate at Wayne State University in the Nutrition and Food Science Department, although I mainly focus on community health. And my fellowship project was in collaboration with Gleaners Community Food Bank, titled One-on-One for a Healthier You. But before we get into the actual One-on-One for a Healthier You program, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm trying to go to the next slide, but I don't think I have that control. There we go. So some of this term may be familiar to some of you, it may not, but food insecurity is the lack of access to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members, and limited or uncertain availability to nutritionally adequate foods. And 1 in 7 people in Michigan alone struggle with this. And it is projected that because of the COVID pandemic, the 2020 food insecurity rate will increase to 20.4%, and that's just in Wayne County. And this is an increase from the 15.5% reported in 2019. Let's go to the next slide. So originally, the plan was to collaborate with Gleaners and Centering Pregnancy, a program that takes individual prenatal appointments and turns them into these group discussion, group session type of appointments. For those of you not familiar with the Schweitzer Fellowship term, a boulder, Dennis has brought it up already, but just in case, it is a hurdle or challenge you may face along the way. And for all of us, we all had a major boulder in 2020, and that was COVID. Because of COVID, the project was delayed. So I started working with Gleaners Emergency Food Mobile Distributions on my 2-week extended spring break after having a conversation with my advisor where we talked about the increased need for food for those children who are out of school. Because of course, that's the type of conversation you have in the middle of a pandemic. Ultimately, though, the original plan was delayed until October, where it was eventually canceled. So I kind of had to regroup with Gleaners on a new project. Next slide. So after brainstorming with my site mentor, Sarah Mills, we came to the conclusion that the new program, whatever we came up with, not only needed to meet the goals of reducing food insecurity, but also needed to be able to provide clients with some sustainable resources for their health. There was the need for an inclusion of nutritional educational material, but also the need for increased utilization of some of the things that clients were receiving at these distributions. Based on some feedback from early surveying from people who were visiting the distributions, it was kind of hard for some people to use some of the produce or products that they were provided in time to when it was fresh or reusable. Next slide, please. Overall, we came up with 3 goals. Obviously, we wanted to decrease food insecurity. We also wanted to increase knowledge of nutrition through one-on-one counseling and the educational materials that would come up. And finally, we want to see increased utilization of those food projects. And this led to our new project, which we titled One-on-One for a Healthier You. Next slide. I included the flyer here so that you see exactly what the community saw. I was still with the distributions and I was the person who would usually do check-in at whatever site I was scheduled at. So the sites that I was at were able to get a little bit more information if they had questions about it. We also sent a text with a link to the flyer for those who were signed up with messaging from Gleaners. The program overall was 30-minute sessions bi-weekly for 3 months for a total of 6 sessions with 2 gift card incentives to the grocery store of their choice, 1 halfway through and 1 at the end of the program. But these sessions weren't just me reading off a lesson virtually or over the phone. We sent 3 booklets with nutrition topics, build your own recipes and tips to each person enrolled. And I really wanted it to be more of a conversation than a lesson. Next slide. In terms of evaluation, did we meet our goals? Did we decrease food insecurity? That's really hard to say considering distributions are still happening. The pandemic is ongoing, although we are emerging. So we don't know the full impact of everything just yet. Increased knowledge of nutrition and increased utilization. Because post surveys aren't done until the participants' 6th session and only 2 have finished the entire program, there isn't actual evaluation of quantitative data to show that. However, from my conversations with the participants, I believe it has. There was only 5 people in this group, so it was a very small but very engaged group. And overall, I like to think about what impact did this have. So by the end of the program, I did have over 500 hours of service and over 300 of those were direct with the population. So I believe that I had a positive impact, not only on the individual, but my favorite part is on the family and friends. The participants that I did have calls with gave me feedback on the recipes they tried, what worked for them, what didn't work. I liked hearing what didn't work because that means they tried it and they found something that didn't work. And they mentioned multiple times that they were sharing information with their family and friends about it and asked me if it was okay if they take pictures of the booklets they received and give it to their family and friends. And of course, I had no problem with that. There's always room to improve and adjust though, and inclusion of different diets did come up, especially meatless and diabetic diets. Again, this is an emergency food distribution in response to the pandemic, so that might have not been taken into consideration, but this is especially tough for diabetic patients who watch their carbohydrate and sugar intake. Next slide. In terms of sustainability, food insecurity existed before COVID. It was just everybody was hit hard during COVID, like every other field and area. But even without COVID, food insecurity in Metro Detroit is an issue. What I feel empowered to change, or I feel I have the capacity to change, is the programming I choose to be a part of to help change the conditions for the populations I serve. First and foremost, I think we need to start adapting our resources to include more populations based on the feedback we receive. It isn't so cookie cutter, so we kind of need to start altering our materials to reflect that. We also discussed filtering those who did participate in this program into further education programming, such as a Cooking Matters course. However, that's still being discussed because some people might have technology barriers trying to be a part of it virtually if it will be offered virtually. But programming is discussed with each participant on their last call and the different options they have. We also discussed using dietetic interns that Gleaners often gets questions about, how schools reach out to Gleaners and ask, we have these dietetic interns, do you have any use for them? And the answer has been no so far. So why not use them for some of these one-on-one services in some way? We also discussed an FAQ page with some common questions about distributions, nutrition, and health. Also a chat line or inquiry line where someone can submit a question, a comment, or something of interest to then be followed up with by someone. Just trying to continue that one-on-one type of interaction in a semi-virtual way, depending on how things go. Next slide. So reflecting back on the past year, I must have used the word adaptable at least 50 times in the first half of my monthly reports. COVID was a very unique experience, and it allowed me to be even more adaptable and face more hurdles and adjust to situations in the fellowship, even more so than I probably would have without COVID, no matter how many times you plan for it. I state here in my second little bullet point to be more confident professionally. And by this, I mean being okay with sending up a follow-up email, being okay with stating your ideas, being a little bit more vocal in our work, being more comfortable exploring different realms. One of the topics that came up in our cohort meetings, specifically this one just stuck out to me, was social entrepreneurship. And it's something that I would have never even put in line with my work. So just being exposed to these different areas and kind of seeing what realm you can explore. As students, we don't often refer to ourselves or feel like experts, especially when we're working with such well-established organizations. We shy away a little bit. And I'm sure everyone has experienced a little bit of imposter syndrome at some point in their life, but we kind of have to remember that we study in these fields, we have a passion for this work, start treating ourselves like a little bit more of experts with an openness to continue learning. And last, or not last, second to last, I also had to reflect and realize that COVID happened to everyone. Not just saying it only happened to me, but it happened to everybody. It happened to all of these organizations. It was novel to everyone. So we were all experiencing these adjustments and hurdles together. So it was a learning curve for everyone. And now the last bullet point, between projects, I was very discouraged. And after having a conversation with Dennis, he encouraged me to remember why I started participating in humanitarian work and in these programs to begin with. It wasn't specifically the Centering Pregnancy program that got me here. I had already had a passion for the realm of work, humanitarian work, and food insecurity going into it. It's why I pursued a PhD, caring about those who face preventable illnesses and the social factors that play into that is why I got started. So just because a project you had in mind doesn't play out the way you think it's going to, doesn't mean you forget why you started in the first place. And now last slide. The last slide is just a thank you to Authority Health and the Schweitzer Fellowship Board. Of course, a huge thank you to Dennis and Shelley for all the help along the way, and my faculty mentor, Dr. Kress, and community site mentor, Sarah Mills. And last but not least, my fellow cohort mates who experienced all the boulders in 2020 with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Very thoughtful comments, and we appreciate it. And now our next presenter is Ashleigh Peoples, Wayne State University School of Medicine.
So I thank everybody for coming and listening to this presentation. So I'm going to speak on my presentation. As Dennis mentioned, I am a graduate of Wayne State School of Medicine, and I will be moving to Pittsburgh to start my next journey as a family medicine resident physician at UMPC Shadyside in Pittsburgh. So I'm going to talk about my project, the PACE care model, as in medical trainees to reduce injurious falls and supporting healthy aging in place. And next slide, thank you. And next slide. So for the vision, this presentation is broken into 3 parts. So I first pursued the Schweitzer Fellowship because I felt in danger of losing my why. I needed to kind of reclaim and revisit the reason and the passion I had for service, focusing on service for no other reason than seeing a need, wanting to help address a problem that was largely attributable to structural and societal isms that resulted in adverse outcomes and circumstances for or among a group of people that just didn't need to be. At the same time, so I've kind of needed to kind of revisit that. Next slide. While I was preparing for medical school in 2014, I was reading the book Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, and that book explored some key topics, including productive aging, independence, aging in place, home environment factors, continuity of care, caregiver strain, and just overall quality of life and death. Around that same time that I was reading that book, I had my first exposure to an aging relative as an adult, and that was my maternal aunt, Gloria. And I saw each of the topics in his book play out extensively with my aunt, and unfortunately those outcomes were not the best. My aunt passed away May of 2016, months before I began medical school. And she lived by her faith, serving and caring for others, especially her family. And I believe that everyone in my family did the best that they could to care for her, but I do not feel that that best was all that she deserved. So that was sort of the inspiration for my project. It was the experience with my aunt, Gloria, and also the parallel exposure of the book Being Mortal. It was then that I kind of asked, my aunt passed away, and then I kind of realized that there were other things that could be done, and we could focus on the elderly in a different way, especially within America, and trying to kind of come up with strategic ways to kind of really make their environment safe and have the quality of life and their end of life the way that they would have wanted to be, regardless of how they may have lived their life younger. So next slide. So along the way, as kind of Janine alluded to, and over the last year, we had the COVID that had very much impacted the way that the vision for this project kind of set up. But I think what I learned most important was the commitment to being open to strategies and ideas and methods to address the problem and a need that come along the way. Recognizing that maybe the way we started or the idea that started is either evolving or there is a better way, and being open to receiving that. And I thank Dennis and the fellowship for continually to provide those opportunities and to continue to support me in being open and connecting me with ways that would still allow me to serve the population that I wanted, even in light of and in spite of the environment of COVID. Next slide. So the work, again, this is kind of into 3 different phases, but my primary project was partnered with PACE. It's the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. It is a national healthcare model, which incidentally or coincidentally was discussed as one of the primary and I guess key models of health and healthy aging discussed in Atul Gawande's book that I read several years before I decided to partner with PACE. And they build a model of interdisciplinary care for the geriatric population that includes not only just their quality of life with life enrichment, but also their healthcare environment, physical rehab, and occupational therapy, and support for caregivers and social workers. So the intervention that I wanted to do was partner specifically with the rehab team, and I wanted to address the issues of falls in this population. So falls are the leading cause of injury in the aging population, resulting in an estimated amount of, estimated 2.8 visits to emergency room departments annually. Adapting the physical environment to accommodate the changing mobility, cognitive, and functional needs of this population largely reduces the accidents and supports aging in place. So I partnered with the PACE specifically to come into direct contact with the elderly within their home environment, because I saw that personally it was within that space that my aunt experienced most of her direct impact of family interaction. And it's the place that the elder seniors spend the most amount of their time, and can be a space that is of greatest risk to them. Next slide. So as a graduating or future physician, I wanted to focus on modifying their home environment through not so much as a clinician, but part of the interdisciplinary care team, working with allied health professionals, because again, it was the home environment that I saw the biggest concern for individuals that are aging, and also the place that you see the least. And then as a clinician, I'm going to be seeing patients daily outside of their home. And so I didn't actually need additional exposure to that. I needed exposure to areas that I wouldn't actually get to see once I become a practicing physician, that I think would have been very helpful in how I actually care for this population. Next slide. So this reflection, I have to say that along the way that my project, the focus was a PACE initially, but at the beginning, because of COVID, I was able to partner with SHIP-D and the Healthy Black Elders program, which allowed me to, at the initial stages of COVID, when we really didn't know what was going on, I had an opportunity to help them complete surveys to assess isolation, and just actually check in on those groups of people that they see on a regular basis, and that had become an integral part of healthy aging in place in the Detroit community, that they also were impacted and could not go into their homes anymore and see them. So they had individuals reach out and call them and check on them. And so that gave me an opportunity to get some insight into how seniors were handling this. And then the additional part that I did, which was most of my service hours, was to help administer vaccines to the seniors in Detroit, and at several of the outreach events from February through May 1st. And being able to speak with them, just learned a lot about their dedication to their own health and doing what they can to continue to experience life, but also their resilience and their adaptability. And I think if anything else that I could reflect personally from is that we as a society don't leverage and utilize enough of those that have past experience with things, and in speaking with them to learn how they've obviously made it through, and they can speak on the positives, the negatives, what worked and what didn't work, situations that are very similar. And it may not be exactly the same, but there are commonalities that I think we could leverage better to have a more robust response more quickly to events than what we had, especially in light of COVID. And I think the vaccine rollout situation is even more of an example of that, because so many of the seniors lined up to get it and had no issue getting it. And I think a lot of that was because they know what it's like to not have access to vaccines. They experienced, some of them were as old as 98, 99, and they knew they were born just after the last pandemic. And so they have very, very intimate examples and experiences of that. So I think that was kind of the big thing I got from that exposure. And I think overall, as I move on in my service, is that I remember that the strategies that we use must evolve but that we can't think that our experiences and our strategies and that we came up with are the final answer, because like vines exhibited here in this picture, they do come back, and things kind of rework themselves. And so the goal is never to necessarily completely get rid of something, because I don't think that that's realistic. I think the goal and the strategies we look at should be in recognition that things may revisit and resurface again in the future. Next slide. So I would like to thank the PACE Southeast Rehab team and also just the PACE organization for welcoming me in. The rehab team was absolutely amazing. I worked with Southfield, Rivertown, Dearborn, and I cannot thank them enough for being open to share their time, their experience, and their relationship with their patients, with me. And I think that was the most an important thing, that they felt comfortable enough to also invite me and kind of extend their relationship with their clients with me and allow me in that space as well as the SHPD and Healthy Black Elders Group, the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship people, individuals, and the mentors from Wayne State School of Medicine. Dr. Ayers and Dr. Mendez specifically were amazing and instrumental in pushing me to kind of move forward with this project, and I will be very forever grateful for that, as it has been a wonderful opportunity for me. And I would like to thank the seniors of Detroit for opening themselves and sharing with me, and then my co-fellows who were just awesome and a great experience to know and learn about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Very good. Our next presenter is Nona Bhatia. Nona is with Wayne State University School of Medicine.
Hi, I'm Nona. So my project was an anti-violence collective at Auntie Village. Next slide. So Auntie Village is an organization in West Detroit that provides the Narden Park community with a variety of services, such as a medical clinic, emergency housing, a community garden, a lot more. And so when I started medical school and they were telling us about all our different options for volunteering, I was really attracted to an organization that addresses all of these different social determinants of health. And so I started volunteering there during my first year, and then I wanted to stay involved during my second year and worked as the president. And then during my third year, I also wanted to continue to stay involved. And working with the kids there was one of my favorite parts of being at the village. So I talked to Auntie Nay and the other organizers there, and we decided it would be a good idea for me to try and work on the youth programming that exists at the village. And so we decided to focus on anti-violence and conflict resolution, which is also especially attractive to me because I'm interested in psychiatry. And I wanted to learn about promoting mental wellness and the relationship between adverse childhood experiences and mental health. So I applied to the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship for more support and direction throughout this entire process. Next slide. And so because of the pandemic, I wasn't out in the community as much as I originally intended. And most of my hours went to working in the community garden and then packaging and delivering food boxes to families in Detroit. Next slide. And we actually reached over 400 families each week. We made hundreds of deliveries. And I was really grateful for this opportunity because I was still able to work in the community and connect with people in spite of everything that's been going on with COVID. Just some background about youth violence. So youth violence is an example of an adverse childhood experience, and the CDC defines adverse childhood experiences as potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood and are associated with negative health and well-being outcomes across the life course. Youth violence specifically increases the risk for behavioral and mental health difficulties, substance use, obesity, depression, school dropout, and more. Next slide. So my original goal for this project was to create a program that would help the participants prevent, respond to, and cope with different forms of violence in their lives. I spent the first couple of months of being accepted into the fellowship. I was just working on finding organizations who could help me meet these goals. This was in May and June. And so at this time, with everything that was going on in America, there was a lot of interest, and I was really happy with the way things were progressing. But then at the same time, COVID cases started going up. And as you know, the previous fellows have mentioned, a lot of organizations were focused on keeping their own projects running and weren't able to devote as much time to this project. So I had to keep making changes and kind of substituting other organizations. But the organization I think that was like the most difficult to replace was Detroit Live. That was an organization for young adults in Detroit who had grown up here and they were victims of violence. And they were willing to mentor the kids at Teenage Village and kind of discuss their own experiences in peer groups. And this was the one component I wasn't able to find a replacement for. And I also wasn't able to teach this myself because I haven't gone through any of these experiences. I haven't lived in Detroit, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to teach this component of the program. So the final 4 components were medical emergency preparedness. That consisted of videos created by medical students at Wayne State and included topics like Stop the Bleed, responding to mental health emergencies, and clinical basics. The second component was conflict resolution, and we had videos created by the Wayne County Dispute Resolution Center. They kind of talked about different types of conflict mediation and just different ways to work through problems. The third component was the mindfulness sessions, and that included meditation techniques and gratitude journaling. And then the last component was healing. And this was kind of something I had to come up with last minute as a replacement for the mentors from Detroit Live. And so the healing component was made up of cognitive behavioral therapy guided topics that aided in self-reflection. So I found like cognitive behavioral therapy worksheets for kids, and they had guidance about how to recognize when you're angry and what self-care is, and just things like that might help with coping with violence. And so there are 4 categories, and they each have 8 sessions with 32 total sessions to be taught on a weekly basis throughout the year. Next slide. So the first couple sessions, the first one was held in July and was led by a medical student who was talking about COVID safety. And it's ironic because we were teaching them about social distancing, but if you look at the picture, they're not distancing at all. And so in this session, most of the kids were below 10, so I think they had a harder time kind of staying apart from one another. But overall, the session went really well. I think the kids were very involved. And then Gina, who's the medical student, created safety packs with masks and hand sanitizer and COVID safety tips. Next slide. And then I was able to teach the second session, which was one of the videos from the Conflict Resolution Center. So we just kind of discussed the questions and reflected on the video. So I thought these sessions went well, but after this, the COVID cases worsened even more in Michigan. And because we weren't able to social distance that well, it didn't really make sense to keep holding them in person. Next slide. So I created a website that allowed for the participants to work through the sessions on their own, or for facilitators to use while teaching the sessions. And then I wasn't able to do any sessions again in person until March, when I met with the children on an individual basis. And then we worked through another 6 topics. So overall, I was able to do around 8 sessions throughout the year. My original plan in regards to evaluating impact of the project was to administer pre and post session surveys every week in order to assess for comprehension, evaluate retention, measure interest, and then obtain feedback. And although I obtained IRB approval to move forward with the surveys, the pandemic again forced me to brainstorm new methods of evaluation. And so when I held the one-on-one sessions in March, I was able to begin and end each discussion with a few questions, similar to what I would have done with the surveys anyways. And these discussions showed that 3 out of 5 children who were age 10 and above were able to teach back and summarize the content of the sessions. while the younger children who were aged 8 and 7 had more trouble keeping up with the main ideas. All 5 of the children were at first, they were very hesitant to work through these sessions, as is expected because they're sharing personal information with me. But they all ended up wanting to share more and more about their life experiences and how they take care of themselves and cope with whatever is going on in their lives, especially with the pandemic going on right now. And then I also found that the children all looked favorably upon weekly sessions where they could gather and spend time with their peers, learning, sharing ideas, eating snacks, and more. And although my evaluation impact is mostly made up of anecdotal evidence from the children I worked with, I found it to be very reflective of the potential that the Anti-Violence Collective could have on building a safe community. So overall, this year has been full of boulders that we all experienced, the biggest one being the pandemic. It was really difficult for me to re-envision this project after being fully prepared to begin holding sessions in May. And it felt like every time I made a step forward and found a new organization, there were 10 steps back and I had to rethink the entire thing. And I just kind of felt uncertain about if the project could have any positive outcomes. It was important for me to speak to community members to get feedback about the program, but the pandemic really kind of inhibited my ability to do this. I made sure to talk to Auntie Nay and the other organizers as much as I could, and even to ask the kids what they were interested in, but that was on a much smaller scale than what I originally imagined to do. But in the end, I'm happy with how the website I created lays out a template for future volunteers at Auntie Nay's Village to use while holding these sessions. And I'm grateful I was able to hold any sessions in person at all and hope to continue working on this in the future with the members of the School of Medicine's organization who are interested in continuing this project and using the website to teach more sessions. And one of the more significant impacts that this project had on my own life was to solidify the importance of mental health and having healthy coping mechanisms. Because I want to work as a psychiatrist in underserved areas, I believe that it's important for me to learn about the varying barriers to health and safety in different communities. I'm from California, so I've experienced providing healthcare to low-income immigrant and refugee populations in Sacramento. And although I could apply some of what I learned to this community in West Detroit, there are definitely a lot of significant differences. And having one-on-one conversations with the kids in this community put into perspective how racism, poor education systems, poverty, and exposure to violence affect how they view themselves and the world around them. There's plenty of research to support that adverse childhood experiences can cause negative outcomes during adulthood. And even though we're sure of this, it's shocking to me that we don't prioritize all children and their health and well-being equally. And although it'll take a lot of work on society's part as a whole to eliminate these disparities, I know that as an individual, I can attempt to provide children with coping mechanisms to prevent the different forms of violence they might experience from having a long-lasting impact on their development. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone at Auntie Nay's Village. Gina, one of the med students who's on this call, she was really helpful throughout the year. Dr. Mendez, Dr. Apple, my advisors, Dr. Yoder and Dr. Custer, and then of course, Dennis and Shelley, who've been really helpful with everything throughout the year. And then to all the other fellows, I'm really glad that we made it through this year. That's it.
Thank you, Nona. Very nice. Our next presenter is Eliana Small from Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine.
My project was the Street Medicine Healthy Feet Initiative. And so kind of just to give a little background on this project, I'm a fourth-year medical student at Michigan State's College of Osteopathic Medicine at our Detroit campus. And we operate a program called Detroit Street Care, and I had the privilege of serving as the president of this program during my second year of medical school, and staying on as our lead student advisor during my third and fourth years. And we work in tandem with Wayne State's Street Medicine Detroit program. And through these programs, we're able to offer both shelter-based clinic medicine as well as do street outreach. And you can see the backpacks in this picture. you can find pretty much anything you'd need in a primary care office for the most part in those backpacks. And yes, they are heavy. So the point of this project was kind of got started. Dean Carpenter was the NP that worked for many, many years with NSO, and he passed away in August of 2019. And Dean always talked about the importance of foot care, and for a population who uses their feet as their major mode of transportation, the homeless are incredibly vulnerable, and this is an often overlooked aspect of care. When if you don't know where you're sleeping tonight, why do you? A lot of people don't bother to, maybe keep up on their blood pressure medications, let alone think about cutting their toenails or doing something so trivial. But these things are important and can have a great impact on somebody's life and their, standard of living. So following Dean's passing, we wanted to keep that message alive, and just kind of it goes back to just the ethos of street medicine at its core. And so we started a monthly foot care clinic at the shelter, and it took off. Everybody loved it. People just really enjoyed coming in and getting to talk, and it was relaxed, and we played music, and it was just a good place to be. And I realized this wasn't enough, and so that's why we decided to ramp up the foot care that we're providing. And so the point of my project was to basically ingrain foot care into the services that we provide through street medicine, both in shelters and on the street. And the target audience of this initiative were folks both staying in shelters as well as living unsheltered outside. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as you can see in this picture, we can kind of set up shop anywhere. And, whether it be in an encampment outside or, on the steps of one of the churches that we visit, or this bottom right picture is inside Fort Street Presbyterian. And that little black duffel bag, we've got 2 of these now. So we're able to, have one that's our dirty bag and be able to be sterilizing all of our equipment while another bag's still out on the street. It's expanded the scope of care that we're able to provide. And next slide, please. And so part of this project was delivery of services and training of volunteers. And another part of this project was distribution of kits, because so much of this is super preventable. If somebody has a pair of nail clippers or has dry socks or whatever it may be. And so over the course of the year, we distributed about 600 of these kits. And then given COVID, we included a bunch of, masks and hand sanitizer and other such things in them as well. And these were given out both in our shelter-based clinics and on our street outreach. Next slide, please. And so one of the ways that I was initially anticipating measuring outcomes was through surveying of our students before and after they received training. Obviously, COVID put a little bit of a wrench in that plan because we couldn't have mass amounts of students coming and volunteering with us. So a lot of our feedback became much more anecdotal. But I did want to share with you guys a few of the quotes that I got. So primarily patient feedback was a big thing that we focused on. So we adapted the items that were included in these kits over time based on feedback, as well as the care that we were delivering. But a few good little quotes we got were, "My feet haven't felt this good in years. All that pressure is gone because you guys took the time and did something for me. I don't imagine you loved doing it either. Thank you. I could tap dance. My feet feel so fresh right now. I hope you know this made a big difference in my day. Thank you." And there's a big list of these, and they're obviously not all of the feedback was good, and that was how we were able to, improve this throughout the year. But we got a lot of feedback from our volunteers as well. A few that I wanted to share were, when somebody comes in with such severe pain and they leave without discomfort, without a limp, tap dancing because you were able to take away their pain with such a simple step, that is a truly incredible feeling. I had a lot of fun today and I had a really great experience. It's so relaxing and satisfying. It truly felt like a partnership between me and my patient, and I felt like she was teaching me just as much, if not more, than I was helping her. We learned together the whole time, and I really enjoyed my first experience here. The foot care clinic was a really gratifying experience. It is really humbling to clean and take care of someone's feet. You forget the simple comfort of having healthy feet, and you don't realize how much Healthy Feet can improve someone's day and life. I enjoyed this so much more than I ever thought I would. And so that feedback was great to hear from our students, and I think it keeps them coming back as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so you can kind of see one of our setups, but initially the plan was to do this whole project partnered with one shelter that like a lot of stuff changed throughout the year because of COVID, and we ended up partnering. So now we are providing foot care at several shelters. So our kind of sustainable schedule moving forward beyond just this project, but this is now just what both Detroit Street Care and Street Medicine Detroit are working together to do moving forward, is every weekly we're holding foot care clinics at Operation Get Down's shelter, at Fort Street Presbyterian's Soup Kitchen, at Pope Francis during their pop-up at TCF right now, and then once they go back over to St. Peter and Paul later this month, bi-monthly at NSO, and then 3 days a week during street outreach. So this is just kind of like a new piece of the street medicine puzzle. It's not existing as a separate entity anymore. It's kind of just built into what we're doing moving forward. So that is 5 days a week of foot care resource availability for folks living both unsheltered and staying in shelters in Detroit. Can we go to the next slide, please? And along with all of this, obviously this year had a lot of changes. So we did a lot of other stuff as well. This all for me came to a little over 750 service hours this year. And a lot of these other pieces were things like building and maintaining field hand washing stations during COVID-19 shutdowns, enacting policy which prevented eviction of encampments during COVID-19, providing COVID-19 vaccines to our unsheltered neighbors, participating in COVID-19 mass community testing days, hosting advocacy workshops at the International Street Medicine Symposium, and then distributing several thousand COVID-19 safety kits in addition to the foot care kits, and just at the base of it all, strengthening our network of community allies. I felt really lucky to get to work with so many motivated people during such a crazy time, and just looking forward to going to all of these events that we hold, and having the volunteers echo that same energy was really exciting for me and really rewarding. And I just had a really great network of people. And I put this picture on the last slide here because this is Stanley from Covenant Community Care's outreach team, and Jim, who is our outreach nurse that we work with, and they're both just phenomenal humans. And so I wanted them to be on here as well. So that kind of brings me to the end, and I wanted to special thank you to my team, Detroit Street Care, our counterpart, Street Medicine Detroit, then all of our community partners, the Pope Francis Center, Fort Street Presbyterian, NOAA Project, NSO, the Detroit Recovery Project, Authority Health, then of course, Dennis and Shelley, and my faculty mentors, Dr. Bryce and Jim, and as well as all the other fellows. So thank you very much.
And our next presentation will come from Sean Jones, who is both a MBA student at Wayne State and a student of the School of Medicine.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean. As Dennis, thank you for the introduction. Shelley, could you please just go to the next slide? Okay, so what is JADA? My proposal really for Authority Health was to create a fully functioning clinic for individuals with disabilities, that being intellectual and developmental disabilities, because of the specific need in this population with help navigating the healthcare system and really providing the care that they need, because we know it needs to be very tailored. So JADA stands again for Joining Adults and Youth with Disabilities Through Access. And what it is a network that it's a mobile and web-based platform that allows people to connect to the right services for their needs. So kind of instead of going through this slideshow, I just kind of want to say how we got here and how I went from a willingness to give to a wantonness to give. And I'll take you back to 2013, the summer of 2013 in Oshawa at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. The goal was always to get into medical school. How? I don't know. So I kind of entered this research lab with Dr. Lloyd, studying motor behavior and physical activity of individuals with disabilities. And I walked into the gym on our first intervention. And I saw that I could do research from, kicking, skipping, jumping, seeing kids throw balls at the wall to test their fine motor and gross motor skills. And I thought it was a good gig. Like, I can do research and kick a ball. Like, I'm all in. But what I didn't notice at that point in time was the journey that I was about to embark on. And throughout those years, I went through and I was working at something called the Ability Center, running day programs for adults now with disabilities and teaching children in the community soccer. And seeing those fine motors and gross motor skills. I remember someone in the ability program named Nick. He was quite clumsy, couldn't really kick a ball too well, but the joy that he had from, playing soccer and learning and being with his peers. But what I also saw was a parent that didn't know how to navigate the healthcare system, didn't know how to find programs for their child. And that was, I didn't know how to take it at that point in time, but only when she met the other parents was she able to find, new resources and being able to put her child with those other kids in. So then I moved forward, and then I was at the Ability Center, and I saw Ashleigh, who loved to play basketball, and Mikhail, who loved to play basketball, but because of their medical indications and not on the right treatment, they were removed from program now for months at end, and with no solution in sight. And this was very problematic to me, and I didn't know necessarily how to solve the issue at that point in time, but I knew something had to be done. So my willingness to give, I always was able to, help people in the community and always wanted to, but I obtained this wantonness before medical school when I saw, these social inequalities in my own community. And, I was back in Canada where people said, oh, healthcare is great, but it's not. And so what I needed to do in a sense was, now I attended Wayne State School of Medicine now solely for the reason, picking the school because they had something called the MI-LEND program, which stands for Michigan Leadership in Education and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities. And at that point in time, I wanted to kind of see, was the problem the same on both sides of the border, which I believed it was, but I had no confirmation. But what upset me along this journey prior to that was that whenever I asked, could you tap into resources in the States or vice versa, it was always, well, the healthcare system is too convoluted. And then that would be the end of the conversation. But that wasn't a good enough answer for me. So ended up going to Wayne State with the goal to get into this fellowship program. And that's where I met Dr. Mendez, who's on the call. Hi, Dr. Mendez. And she kind of guided me and really early. And so I ended up getting into the fellowship in my second year at university or of medical school. Probably one of the hardest times in my life trying to balance this, 300-hour fellowship during second year studying for STEP. But we made it through. And what I learned was that the problems were the same on both sides of the border. And parents, just like in Canada, in the States, were struggling, if not more, to find, access to resources for their children and the right healthcare. So I had a decision to make at that point in time. At the end of that fellowship, is what do I do? Do I continue to pursue this JADA, or do I just kind of go into, a specialty in medicine, like go into surgery or whatever I want to do? But for me, it didn't feel right. And I had this new wantonness to give. So I decided that the greatest capacity could probably come from doing my MBA and going to do and tackle it business, because it was the fastest and most efficient way to get things done in my mind. So that's what I did. I stepped out of medical school for about a year and a half and pursued that. I went back home, acquired a team, both now in America and in Canada, with, just really diverse teammates that come from all walks of life, and just trying to get a different perspective. What we did this year was interview a lot of parents during the times of COVID, learning from, not assuming what the problem was, but more so, yeah, we had a hunch, but like, what is the real problems? What are you going through now and asking these really hard questions and having really hard conversations, trying to get, to a solution. And that's kind of where we were able to build this, application now, where we're going to be helping distribute vaccines through the Authority Health. And they've been really supportive, and really with the pop-off health clinic, we were able to get a fully functioning clinic that was able to partner with us, and so supportive in a time where it was really difficult to get things done in a time of a pandemic. And then also being home and trying to, be remote, how we are. Like, I could do this and you think I'm frozen. So, and it's really, it's really weird times, but there's a lot of beauty in it. And what I would say is that a huge boulder that I faced was something that I took on. I was able to get a contract with the Association of University Centers of Disability Support, and provides families to figure out how to provide families with access to telehealth. And that was through the USAID, HRSA, and the AAP. And I was the director on this project. And where I thought these were same people who wanted to make an impact on the community as much as I did, I felt as though that I was being stifled, and it was more so about how to stifle my time and take away from Jada and take away from what I was doing to try to make this difference, and more so on little nuances about references not being right, and the work was still getting done, and more so. So without my team, I wouldn't have been able to pull through that and get through these challenging times, both financially and mentally. It almost tore me down, but I was able to get through and make, I lost some mentors, but I gained new ones. And we're here today where we're in a great spot, and we're still gonna try to keep going. We're gonna help distribute vaccines to the population using this technology, and we're gonna be able to service the population that we want, because if individuals with disabilities and their families were already having a difficult time, can you imagine now when a pandemic hit and everything's flipped upside down for them? They're back home, they don't have routine. It's hard to even conceptualize that. So that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps my wantingness to give. And this is why I think the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship was the best platform, because when I had someone, or I had an experience that was trying to tear me down, I had equal, if not more, support on the other hand to push me through this and keep going. So what this is kind of, an individual would put their primary diagnosis, that intellectual disability, could be autism, Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, and then as the secondary diagnosis, that being a chronic disease, maybe diabetes, or or maybe it's a mobility issue, and it would now match that individual based on their needs and their location to somewhere that could provide that service for them. I want to just thank the Health Authority, Dennis, Shelley, Dr. Yoder, my mentors, who's also on this, Fran Salas, Dr. Mendez. She's been amazing. And there's so many people I'm missing. I can't even say that. I know my family's on this call too, so thank you. So thank you, everyone. And also my fellows, you guys, in a time where I thought it wasn't possible, I saw you guys pushing through, and I seen you guys, changing the way things could be done in the status quo. So thank you guys.
And our final presentation today comes from Quinton Jenkins, University of Michigan School of Public Health.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully I'm muted correctly. Like was mentioned, thank you for introduction, Dennis. My name is Quinton Jenkins. I'm a graduate now of the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and I have my master's degree, thank God. I've only had it for a couple of weeks, but I'm hoping to put it to good use. My degree is in occupational and environmental epidemiology. A little bit about me: I'm originally from South Carolina, grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, was able to attend undergrad at Morehouse College in Atlanta. And quickly after that experience, I was here in Ann Arbor, starting my graduate school journey. Unfortunately, my time in Ann Arbor is coming to an end, real tears. These last 2 years have been filled with a lot of highs and lows, but I've had a lot of amazing experiences and met a lot of great people. And one of those amazing experiences has been being a part of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship. So you guys can go to the next slide, please. So why the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship? So kind of like what was mentioned earlier, community service is something that I've been doing for a really long time now. I was raised by my grandparents, and they've always kind of instilled in me the importance of not just doing community service because someone is telling you to do it, but making sure like it's just a part of who you are and a part of your being. And I've done a lot of community service when I was an undergrad, but haven't participated in a lot of programs that kind of gave me the opportunity to help design and implement work and taking on that leadership role, as well as making it consistent work. And as I started becoming a student at the University of Michigan and joining the Public Health Action Support Team, or FAST, and talking with a former Schweitzer Fellow, Jasdeep, they pointed me in the direction of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship. And after talking with Ms. Dana Thomas, who was on the call, who's been such an amazing guide and support throughout this entire experience from start to finish, I was able to connect with the Green Door Initiative. You go to the next slide, please. So I can spend days talking about the phenomenal work of the Green Door Initiative under the direction of President and CEO, Ms. Donnell Wilkins. She has been a champion, which seems like an understatement, of environmental justice and advocacy and awareness, not only in Detroit, but she's known nationally and internationally for the work that she does in this area. And I was introduced to Ms. Wilkins through Ms. Dana Thomas, who were able to match the interest that I had of being in occupational environmental epidemiology and my want to do community service with the youth and programming, community and capacity building. And when I was able to talk with Ms. Wilkins, on our first conversation, we immediately aligned our goals and our missions, and we knew exactly what we wanted to do. And she was looking for someone at the time to come in and help create a youth program that was sustainable in nature and something that she could use not only for that summer, but she could build on going forward. And if you would go to the next slide, please. And so we agreed that we would start doing a youth program. And so the main objective of the program that we decided would be to provide youth with hands-on curriculum, blending social, civic, and environmental engagement to address the planet's most pressing and environmental issues, which seems like a lot, but we believe at the time that we could really tackle this. And, you know, with her extensive background in this and the things that I was learning at the School of Public Health, we just kind of agreed that this would be a great opportunity for us. And next slide. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit and boulders started flying out of nowhere. A lot of the programming that we had planned, and I'll kind of explain what we ended up doing, but initially, our youth program was focused on in-person setting. We were going to spend a couple of weeks throughout the summer, which is kind of what Ms. Wilkins had already designed a youth program for, to do summer work. We would take a couple of weeks out. We'd be meeting with students every day, being able to provide stipends to students. But when the pandemic hit, kind of like what was mentioned earlier, everything came to a screeching halt. And one of the things that kind of impacted our ability to move forward was that, you know, our priorities started to shift as well. So, you know, the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship as an organization had its priorities. The Green Door Initiative, what its priorities were at the time, now shifted. So, you know, we went from being able to provide me with disposable income to create a program to now trying to figure out if the program is going to be able to survive the pandemic. You know, are they going to be able to keep their lights on because funding had stopped? So now, you know, me coming in here wanting to create a youth program is no longer our priority for the Green Door Initiative. And then I kind of had my own priorities as well. And some of my own boulders I was dealing with, not only as a grad student, but you know, it's okay to talk about this now because, you know, we're a year removed, but during the time, you know, the research at the university, as I'm sure everyone knew, kind of stopped. And so we, you know, we weren't able to do human subjects training. We weren't able to get paid. And for me as a grad student, a lot of my funding came from the research that I was doing. So I was doing all of this research that wasn't getting paid. I was doing research that I was originally supposed to be going abroad for the summer in Brazil to do research. It was also not getting paid. So all of this work that I'm doing and no funding coming in. So now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for rent, and these deadlines are coming up. And so it was just kind of like a moment where it's like, what's going on? Like, am I going to be able to continue the work that I'm doing, you know, with the same expectations that I originally had? And the answer was no. You know, it took a lot to be honest with yourself about what you were going to be able to do and how you were going to adapt and be flexible with the work that you were going to be doing going forward. And you know, just an initial thank you to Dennis and Shelley for even having a conversation with us as fellows during the time about how we were going to change our in-person scenario to more of a virtual world. And so I put on here as well, like some of the mistakes I made, which the main one was miscommunication. I put that specifically because sometimes we have this idea that we know exactly what we're doing when we're doing it. And sometimes when we're met with these boulders, it really starts to illuminate some of the weaknesses that we do have. And for me at the time, even though there was so much going on, me and our service partner, the Green Door Initiative, initially started miscommunicating, obviously not intentionally, but there's so many things going on, so many priorities are shifting. And so there was a moment where it felt like nothing was happening. And even though things were happening, it felt like nothing was happening. And I think it took a lot for me and Ms. Wilkins to get back on the same page about what our priorities were as a program. Because as a scholar, I still have to meet certain deadlines. And she was still looking to do things with the Green Door Initiative. And so after we were able to come back and get on the same page, we really started to redesign what the program looked like. And through some amazing work of Ms. Wilkins, she was able to secure some partnerships with the Globe program and Tennessee State University. And we were able to move forward with our youth program. And so it did look differently. And so instead of doing things throughout the summer, throughout this last semester, spring/winter, we were able to have 5 weeks of training for about 15 students. And throughout those training sessions, we were able to teach students how to do things such as taking temperature, surface temperature versus like in-home temperature, which is really important when you realize that as climate change gets worse, it gets getting hotter outside. Students are outside playing and it's getting hot, so they need to learn how to protect themselves throughout the heat. We were teaching them things such as GIS mapping. And so they were able to look and see where they even lived. You know, a lot of people weren't even able to know what community they were in, and if the grocery stores were even near them, living next to factories, and they never knew it, which was a kind of a bittersweet moment. I don't know if anybody has worked with kids for a long time, but you know, there's this natural curiosity that students have, but sometimes when you're exposing them to things the way the real world works, right? So when we're taking a map and they're able to see that there's no grocery stores in their community, and there's an initial like, wow, that's really interesting. And then the next moment is, whoa, there's no grocery stores in our community. You know, why is that? Who's in charge of these things? And having to answer those conversations, which I thought was really interesting as well. So we were able to adapt and have that program for students with the support of Ms. Wilkins, who gave some sessions, Dr. David Pageant, who was out of Tennessee State, Ms. Carrie Fulton, who does a lot of work in the environmental space, Dr. Sakobi Wilson, as well as Layla, who did a lot of support for our program. And next slide, please. So this kind of moves into, did you make a change or were you changed? So I found, you know, I don't know if anyone has been on social media lately, but I'm sure a lot of my co-fellows are familiar with this meme. And so my first question is, did you make a change? And a lot of us have kind of gone through the evaluation process now. For our program specifically, we use 2 different evaluation metrics. So we have an advisor survey as well as a student survey. And so we were able to create a list of questions that really got at what the students were learning, as well as were they even enjoying the program? Working with students in middle school, sometimes you're teaching them all these things, but it's like, are they enjoying it? You want to make sure you're giving them information in a way that's going to keep them coming back. And so we were able to ask some of these questions throughout our survey, and we're still waiting for some responses to come back. So we haven't started analyzing them yet. But even based off of our conversations we were having with students, you could tell that they were being exposed to things that they have never thought about. A lot of them had no clue what environmental justice work was, environmental advocacy, what environmental health disparities were. And, for the current medical school students, which I'm, hoping to be one day soon, we know that environmental health disparities is growing, and your environment is starting to make up more of some of people's negative health outcomes. And so having these conversations with students early on, it was really important for us. And so, then the next question is where you changed, and the impact that I not only have, but the impact that was had on me. Just learned a lot about myself and what it means to be a community member and building capacity in communities as well. Like, it's not all, glitter and butterflies and rainbows, but it takes a lot of hard work and dedication. And like what my co-fellow said, you have to continue to remember what your why is. And I'm so thankful for this experience that I've had being a part of the Schweitzer Fellowship and a lot of the work that we did. Next slide, please. And I just want to give a special thank you to the Green Door Initiative, who I would not have had the opportunity to do this work without. Ms. Wilkin has been such an asset to not only the work that we were doing, but as I grow from this experience and continue to do my work as an environmental epidemiologist now, I'm continuing to use her as a resource will continue to be important. I want to thank Dennis and Shelley as well for being a guide throughout this experience. A lot of the sessions we were having, like was mentioned earlier, I hadn't even know what social entrepreneurship was. And then now, it has become a real path for me going forward. A special thank you to Ms. Thomas. I could not thank her enough for all of the advice that she's given me throughout the summer and being there for me, as an advisor and to help throughout my experience at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. And a last big thank you to the rest of my co-fellows. You guys' friendship has been amazing throughout this last year and has been a gift. And I cannot wait to see the amazing things and amazing care and research that you guys are going to do. And so thank you.
All right. Thank you, Quinton, and thank you to all of the fellows for the work that you've done and the reflections that you shared today. At this point, I would like to invite Alice Thompson, our chair, to return and present our fellows virtually their Fellowship for Life certificates.
Thank you, Dennis. And to our fellows, your amazing work came across clearly. You had amazing presentations, amazing PowerPoints, and you shared what you're doing with great passion and clarity. So thank you so much. So it is now my honor to present the Certificate of Achievement for our 2020-2021 Fellows for Life. Repeat that, Fellows for Life. You've completed the required 200 service hours on behalf of the community and the spirit of our namesake, Albert Schweitzer. So on behalf of the advisory board, I declare that you each are officially Fellows for Life. As Fellows for Life, you will remain connected to the Detroit chapter, as well as more than 4,000 other fellows for life throughout the country who have shared similar fellowship experiences and the same values. So I'd like to recognize each of you virtually by name, first beginning with Janine Ali. So Janine, on behalf of the board of directors, I declare that Janine Ali has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as Fellows for Life. Janine, congratulations. Next, Ashleigh Peoples. On behalf of the board of directors, I declare that Ashleigh Peoples has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as a Fellow for Life. Congratulations. Nona Bhatia. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I declare that Nona Bhatia has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as a Fellow for Life. Congratulations, Nona. Eliana Small. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I declare that Eliana Small has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as a Fellow for Life. Congratulations. Sean Jones. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I declare that Sean Jones has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as a Fellow for Life. Congratulations, Sean. Last but not least, Quinton Jenkins. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I declare that Quinton Jenkins has completed the requirements of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship and hereby qualifies as a Fellow for Life. So to all of you, congratulations. Thank you for being a part of this fellowship. You've done an amazing job, and we look forward to your continued work in our community. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. And once again, my congratulations to all the fellows for your hard work and achievement. This concludes the celebration of service for the 2020-21 Albert Schweitzer Fellows for Life. It has been a challenging year for all of us. My thanks to the fellows for sticking it out, for pivoting as needed, and making the best of your challenges. Thank you to Alice Thompson for your strong leadership of this program, and to the members of the advisory board for their support and guidance during this difficult year. To the Fellows for Life, our incoming fellows, and our guests, the advisory board has been strident in its support of this program and its future. Thank you to the Metro Health Foundation, which has been a strong partner of the fellowship since its inception. And thanks to PACE of Southeast Michigan, which was a contributor this year. Thank you to the faculty mentors and the site mentors for your time and support, especially your flexibility this year, this pandemic year. Thanks to Paula Tutman, the wantingness to serve, as was picked up by a few of our fellows. Her experience, her wisdom and inspiration was great. Thanks to our local human service and academic presenters who shared their knowledge and experience with the fellows each month at our cohort meetings. Your involvement in this program is a critical component of our fellowship. Thanks to our president and CEO, who couldn't be with us, Loretta Bush, for her strong support of the program. Thanks to our Authority Health staff, Patricia Johnson, Director of Human Resources, Lee Watson, Manager of Public Relations, Shelley Golsky, our Office Coordinator, and Corliss Beard, our Director of Finance, for providing ongoing support for the program. Thanks to family members, many of you are here, our guests, and the friends of the fellowship who have shared this afternoon's celebration of service with our Fellows for Life. Best wishes for health and well-being to all of you, and hope that the coming year will be less stressful for all of us, including our incoming Schweitzer Fellows. Good afternoon.